Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling a highly complex, totally fascinating subject that sits right at the intersection of pop culture, legal battles, and modern media. We're looking at the legacy of Michael Jackson. Now, if you're a dedicated music fan, there's just an undeniable joy in his art, right? The music is absolutely legendary. But as consumers of media, we also find ourselves confronting a deeply complicated history. So how do we process the whole shebang? Well, the media landscape right now is basically offering us two drastically different lenses to look through.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. First, a record-breaking biopic. Second, pure entertainment for fans. Third, the missing chapters. Fourth, the Leaving Neverland documentaries. And finally, two clashing media narratives.
All right, let's jump right into part one, a record-breaking biopic.
Okay, we gotta start by looking at this current massive cultural phenomenon. Antoine Fuqua's sanctioned biopic, simply titled Michael. To really grasp the scale of his film, just look at the box office. It's pulled in a staggering $430 million globally. Now, biopics are notoriously expensive to make, especially when you factor in music rights, and Michael had a huge $155 million budget. But this incredible return? It proves that despite decades of controversies, Jackson's star power remains literally unmatched. Audiences are just flocking to theaters.
Moving right along to section 2, pure entertainment for fans.
This massive financial success has actually revealed a super fascinating divide. Check out this staggering 97% verified hot audience score. While professional film critics have been, somewhat mixed, calling the film a bit sanitized or just a filmed playlist, the fans absolutely love it. And a ton of this praise is directed straight at the star of the film, Michael's real-life nephew, Jafar Jackson. Reviewers consistently point out his phenomenal, Oscar-worthy ability to capture his uncle's voice, his mannerisms, and that undeniable stage presence.
I think this brilliant 5-star review perfectly hits the nail on the head when it comes to the fan experience. It says, beautiful, amazing, and spectacular. This is the closest I will get to a concert. For the dedicated music fan, this movie successfully restores the musical context. It acts like an emotional surrogate concert. In an era where younger generations might literally only know Jackson through a random Spotify playlist, this film brings the victory, bad, and thriller eras right back to vibrant life.
So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding why the film was made this way. James Samataro, an attorney whose firm represents Sony Music, makes a brilliant argument. He says expecting unvarnished truth from a sanctioned biopic kind of misunderstands the dynamics at play. The film was produced by the Jackson estate. Therefore, its primary function is what he calls a catalog activation strategy. Basically, it's a highly polished 2-hour advertisement engineered to send audiences straight to streaming platforms to rediscover the music. And honestly, by that metric, it's a flawless success.
Okay, let's pivot to section 3, the missing chapters.
So that catalog activation strategy we just talked about, it definitely comes at a narrative cost. The Jackson Estate's goal was polished tributainment, which is actually a term Cultured Magazine coined, to describe a film that privileges spectacle, musical genius, and celebration over asking the tough questions. On the flip side, you have the critical desire for the unvarnished truth, an unflinching, totally objective look at the artist's full, complicated life. Critics argue that by focusing so heavily on the music, the film completely ignores the elephant in the room.
You see, the script strategically traces Michael's rise from Gary, Indiana in the 60s through the Jackson 5 era and peaks during the Thriller and Bad tours of the 1980s. But then, the narrative just abruptly stops right there. It completely bypasses the 1990s and the 2000s, and, as we know, that is precisely when the severe controversies and allegations historically began.
Which naturally leads us to Section 4, the Leaving Neverland documentaries.
Now, if the authorized biopic purposely leaves out the 1990s and beyond, well, there's an entire genre of critical documentary filmmaking dedicated exclusively to filling in those missing decades. The absolute most prominent of these is Dan Reed's 2019 Emmy-winning documentary, Leaving Neverland. The film focuses entirely on the detailed allegations of two men, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who allege they were systematically groomed and abused by Jackson as children at his Neverland ranch. This 4-hour documentary is a grueling, highly detailed account from their perspective, and it triggered a massive global reassessment of Jackson's legacy when it first aired.
Now, to understand the full picture, it's vital to note that the Jackson estate and his dedicated fans strongly and unequivocally deny these claims. They point out that both men had previously testified under oath in Jackson's defense, stating back then that these events never occurred. Because of this, fans have organized massive protests, and filmmakers have even released counter-documentaries like Neverland Firsthand and Chase the Truth to rebut the allegations. They suggest the accusers might be motivated by financial gain following some previously unsuccessful lawsuits.
But guys, this legal battle is far from over. In fact, it's spilling right into the present day. There's a 2025 sequel documentary titled Surviving Michael Jackson that tracks the ongoing legal realities. Despite some initial dismissals, changes in California law actually allowed Robson and Safechuck's cases to be revived. And this all culminates in a highly anticipated civil trial scheduled for November 2026. That's right, these allegations against Jackson's companies will actually be tested in a court of law very soon.
Finally, let's wrap this up with Section 5, 2 clashing media narratives.
So how in the world do we make sense of all this? We are essentially looking at two completely different cultural functions. The Michael biopic's primary goal is musical preservation. It's told from the perspective of the estate, focusing heavily on that golden era of the 60s to the 80s. Meanwhile, the Leaving Neverland documentaries aim for survivor advocacy. They are told from the perspective of the accusers, focusing strictly on the late 80s through to today's legal battles. They literally do not overlap. They exist in totally separate spheres of reality.
Which brings us to a pretty fundamental question about media itself. Is it a sanctioned biopic's job to be a publicist or an investigator? I mean, if an estate is funding a movie, can we ever really expect it to investigate its own subject objectively? Or should we just accept that tributainment is purely a celebration of the music and leave the hard-hitting investigations to the documentarians and the courts?
And finally, we're left with this ultimate provocative dilemma. It's one that literally every dedicated music fan has to wrestle with at some point. With the undeniable, history-making genius of the music on one side and the inescapably severe allegations on the other, can we truly separate the art from the artist? Honestly, it's a question this explainer can't answer for you. But with the biopic breaking box office records right now and a massive civil trial looming in 2026, it is for sure a question we'll all be asking for a long time to come. Keep learning, stay curious, and thanks so much for joining me today.